It's been almost 2 years since my wife's boyfriend beat me in front of her. That day, I was mowing the lawn on Saturday. They came to the back patio as I finished. My wife, Kim, and some guy I don't know. He was a light-skinned African-American male, approximately 6 feet tall, weighing approximately 175 pounds. He looked barely of age 21 years old. When I saw them, they seemed too friendly from my point of view. The guy hugged Kim around the waist. I stopped the lawnmower and ran towards them. The guy removed his hand from her waist and assumed a stance that indicated he was expecting trouble. Kim and I were married for 3 years. She was 23 years old, and I was a year younger. We lived in a house that belonged to my paternal grandmother, which I inherited after she died 6 years ago. Kim and I moved there after our honeymoon and have lived there ever since. Kim is a very attractive woman, 5 feet 6 inches, slim, blonde with short hair and a pleasant smile. But at that moment she did not smile, and she didn't look worried. If I had to describe her expression, I would say it was slightly mocking. I stopped 10 feet from them. "What's going on, Kim? Who is this guy who hugged you?" "This is Jamal. He's my boyfriend." Her expression turned into a grin. "Can't be." I looked at him, and he looked at me like a boxer before a fight. I admit it was intimidating. He was bigger than me, that's for sure. I'm Brian Bixler. I'm 5'10" and 160 pounds. I have short brown hair and brown eyes. I looked at Kim. "Explain." He intervened in a low voice. "She already explained it, buddy. Now I'm with her. You are not." I looked at her again. "Is that why you're here? To break up? Do you want to get a divorce?" "Not necessary. I just want to spend time with Jamal. In fact, I've been spending time with him for a month now. You may have noticed." "Well, whether you like it or not, this is what will happen. I've noticed some distance between us lately." "You don't want to divorce me, Brian. How will you find someone better than me? You just have to wait it out. I'm enjoying life with Jamal. You know what? Both of you get out of my sight and off my property." Jamal said, "You go away. We'll stay. This is my house, not hers. I'll call the police and have you both arrested." Kim said, "You won't do this. I have your phone number. I stay. I live here." She waved the phone in front of me. She seemed to believe that Jamal would not let me take him. I snatched it from her. It was a fast movement. I have always had excellent coordination and reaction. I started dialing 911 when Jamal hit me. It was a strong blow, followed by another, this time with the left hand. I was thrown back, but I didn't drop the phone. I walked away, looking down to dial the number, but he was on me before I could do it. I received several blows to the body, ribs, kidneys, and solar plexus. I collapsed to the ground, holding my stomach. Jamal leaned over and took my phone. He laid it on the patio and crushed it with his foot. He stood over me. Kim joined him. She said, "It didn't have to be that way, Brian. You could live with it. You will never beat Jamal." I looked at her without saying anything. I probably wouldn't be able to speak. I was lying on the ground. Jamal came closer and placed his foot on my chest, bending it in a victory position. Kim giggled. She said, "Jamal, don't overdo it. Leave him some dignity. He is a weakling and a loser. He cannot hold his woman and protect his home." He looked at me, grinning. "I fight better than you and have sex better than you. Understand?" I said nothing. He kicked me in the ribs. "Do you understand, bitch?" "Yes." "What?" "Yes, I understand." "Still not enough, boy." "I understand, sir." "Fine. Glad we sorted it out." He turned and went into my house. Kim stood over me, smiling more like grinning. "Jamal has a good apartment. We came to pick up some of my things. I'll be spending a lot of time there, but I'm not moving out of here. You can place your things in the basement bedroom. He and I will take the master bedroom. Understand? No. Unless you kill me, you should leave and never come back." "What?" "Jamal," she screamed. "He doesn't want us to stay." Jamal returned to the street. I still couldn't get up. He said, "We'll leave when we take what she needs. But first I will have sex with your wife in your bed." He hugged her, and they went into the house. I tried to get up. I couldn't. I crawled towards the back gate that led to a group of houses. I was halfway through when I heard Kim scream in passion. "Harder, stronger, take me harder, Jamal." I got to the gate, and one of our neighbors from the other end of the common lawn saw me crawling. It was Bob Billings. He ran up to me. "What happened, Brian?" "What happened?" I said. "No police. Can you take me to the Fine. But you need to state it. You were beaten." "I see." "Please," I said, breathing heavily. "No police. I'll figure it out myself. This is Kim, and I'll handle it myself." He supported me, took me to the car, called his wife, and drove me the 1.5 miles to the hospital. He held me up as I entered. The nurse saw us and ran, screaming for transport. I looked at her. She asked, "What's happened?" "Fight. I lost." I gave Bob my wallet, and he gave her the cards she needed. He handed the wallet back to me, and I was quickly taken to the treatment area. A guy came up and asked where it hurt, and I answered, "In the middle. The whole middle." He pressed and pressed. I moaned and screamed as he pressed on one spot. A nurse came and gave me an injection. That's all I remember until I woke up later after dark. I was in a small room, still in the emergency room. They bandaged me. As I moaned, another guy came. "Mr. Bixler, you woke up. I'm Dr. Pitson. You were badly beaten, but we ran several tests and found no serious internal damage. You may have blood in your urine for a few days. We won't hospitalize you, but you need to stay a little longer. The police will also arrive soon." I have a choice. No, they have already been told this. A few minutes later, 2 police detectives entered the room. Detective Smith was a young black woman. Detective Harvey was a white guy, about 40 years old. They took my statement and said they would contact me later. Smith said my attacker was Jamal Bennett, a young professional boxer. She said I was lucky to get away with just that. That evening, I was discharged from the hospital. I took a taxi home. The house was dark. I went inside and found that Kim had taken most of her clothes. The bed was disheveled, and the bedroom still smelled of sex. I called a locksmith to come immediately, despite the additional costs. He arrived an hour later. I took a shower and changed into sports clothes. All locks have been replaced. I went online and checked my bank account balances. All the money was still there. I opened an account in another bank in my name. I made the maximum transfer from the account we had jointly. It wasn't enough, but I had to figure that out later. I canceled all credit cards except the one I used for work. Then I just sat and thought about what happened and what I should do about it. I am a person who is considered calm. I show this side of myself to most people around me, but in reality, I am not at all calm. I have a good internal reserve of rage. I often wondered if I was born this way or if my imperfect childhood made me this way. I could never decide. My parents fought constantly. One night my father left and never came back. He later died in an industrial accident. He had life insurance, and I was his only child. The money was put into a trust fund for me. My mother went a little crazy after my father left. Essentially, she had a string of sexual relationships. I was 12 when he left. When I was 16, I passed my JED and went to community college, and a year later I went to a large university where I studied finance and accounting with a minor in computer science. I graduated from university at 18. I didn't have any girlfriends until I met Kim on my 18th birthday. It's not that I don't like women, but family life and my mother's debauchery made me cautious and shy in dealing with them. My 18th birthday was celebrated in the back room of the bar in early February. I drank legally for the first time beer. My friends Harry, Bob, and Jackson invited some people from our classes. One of them was Kim. She was 19 and about to graduate. I saw her in my finance and accounting classes. She was very beautiful and sociable. I was interested in her, but was too shy to do anything about it. But the party gave me a chance. She came late. When I saw her there, I immediately went up to her and said hi. "Well, well," she said, "he still talks. I thought you only talked in class." I, Well, I'm shy. I smiled at her. She smiled back. No need to be shy. She looked me up and down. But it's nice. I think I'll take you home for your birthday. Oh, will you pick it up? Is it a joke? Not a joke. You are mine today. You have no choice. After we eat the cake and sing, just follow me. She laughed, but I saw that she was serious. At that moment, a poppy seed cake appeared. We cut it, and they sang me a song. Kim patted me on the shoulder. She beckoned me with her finger, turned around, and walked away. I followed her. Of course I did. She led me outside, turned around, and kissed me passionately. We broke the kiss, and she took my hand and led me across the lawn to a building right behind campus. Her apartment was there. She led me inside and straight into the bedroom. There was dim light. She started unbuttoning my shirt and took it off. I took off my moccasins. She unfastened my belt and pulled down my pants and underwear. I'm going to use you all night. That's how I lost my virginity. Did you like it? Oh yeah, the best thing in the world. Was this your first time? Yes, thank you so much. Please, I enjoyed it too. She got off me and looked at me lying there. She was so beautiful. I knew that I would always remember this moment and the look of her then. We had sex 3 more times that night. She was on a mission, she said, to show me how to please her. Kim moved in with me, and after graduating from university, we got jobs in local companies. I was hired as a programmer for a local retailer. Kim worked for an accountant. Walter Lurker had his own company, with 3 employees, 4 together with Kim. We got married after we got jobs. We lived in the apartment for a few months and then moved into my house when the tenants moved out. I've also had money from my dad's insurance since I turned 18. I haven't seen my mother for a while, but she came to the wedding. With her was an elderly man whom she introduced as her partner. Kim's parents lived in a nearby town and helped organize the wedding. They were good people. Her mother was a mathematics professor at the university. My father was involved in the repair and reconstruction of houses. Eileen and John Clark were unsure about our marriage due to our young age. But they helped us with the arrangements and gave us a trip to Jamaica as a wedding gift. We had a great time there. After about 18 months of marriage, I decided to open my own business, providing full-service accounting and computer services to small and medium-sized businesses. My then-employer became my first client. They saved money because I became their contractor rather than an employee. I soon added many small businesses to my client list. Within a year of starting the business, I worked hard and earned enough to hire 2 employees. I admit that I haven't been home as much as I should have. But Kim and I still had a lot of fun together and had sex 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe we didn't go out as often as we used to before I started my business. But a month before I was beaten, our sex life dried up. Maybe just a couple of times a month. I asked her about it, and she complained that I was neglecting her because of business. When I wanted to go dancing or to dinner, she didn't want to. And she went out for the night with the girls quite often. On the Friday before I was beaten, she called at midnight and said that she would stay with a friend because she had been drinking. She declined my offer to pick her up. So I wasn't surprised to see her with this guy. A week ago, I was studying divorce laws. It appears she had no right to the house or the trust money. But as for business, who knows? I sat and thought about it all, my ribs aching, and looked up information on Jamal Bennett. He was an aspiring boxer, a light heavyweight. He was an amateur champion and was backed by a syndicate. He won his first 3 fights, all by knockout. No wonder he beat me. Sunday passed without much incident. I took ibuprofen and felt better. I went for a short run. I also called Kim's parents and told them what happened. Her father said, "Brian, I can't believe what you said. Call her and ask. I'm sure she'll be with her boyfriend, unless he's in jail." Maria interrupted. "She's always been, shall we say, unstable, Brian. She had seizures. We never discussed this with you because she never had such attacks. It's like a relapse. Maria, I don't care. I have to move on. I'm sorry she did that. I thought we were doing well until last month. We will call her, of course. Do you have any messages? No, nothing needs to be said. We hung up. I had an idea. I called the security system installation company and asked them to come out on an urgent basis. They also arrived an hour later. We discussed what needs to be done. I asked for a system to be installed that would make a very loud noise upon entry. She will also call the local police. Everything was installed before dark on Sunday, and that was helpful because right after they left, Kim called me. I didn't answer. I listened to her voicemail later. You bastard, you told my parents. You're an asshole. I swear that I will take revenge on you for this. This time you won't get up. I called the detectives and left a message. Smith called me back. I played the audio recording for her. She said it was a crime to make threats. She'll get a warrant if I forward the tape to her. That's exactly what I did. Early on Monday morning at 2 o'clock, there was a noise at the door. I looked out the window. I looked into my safe in the basement and took the gun. Kim and Jamal tried to use her key to open the door. I changed the locks. Kim, leave now. Never. We'll go in anyway. But Jamal didn't seem sure he wanted to do it. He pulled her away, and they got into the car and drove away. I slept with a pistol at my side. Nothing else happened. On Monday morning, I went to the office, gave some instructions, and went to see a lawyer to secure some things. I spent 2 hours there. I gave him power of attorney and a set of instructions. I then went to the bank and closed the joint account and also withdrew all the money from the savings account. I took the cashier's check and went to the new bank to deposit the money into the new account. I then went into a moving company and storage facility. I went back to the office and talked to my 2 employees about what was going to happen. We spent a lot of time on Monday and Tuesday discussing all the bills. I have given my deputy, Jane Drummond, permission to hire another person if necessary. By Tuesday evening, the house was empty. I put everything I needed in a backpack or in the motorcycle saddlebags. That evening, a for rent sign was placed on the front lawn. I went to a mobile phone store and bought a new phone with a new number. I turned off the old phone and put it in my backpack without the battery. I called my friend Jackson Deal, who lived in Mountain City, 2 hours away. He was waiting for me when I arrived at 9:30 p.m. He met me at the door. He worked as a construction worker and lived in a renovated barn outside the city. He was married, and he and his wife Jenna had a 1-year-old daughter, Dee Dee. The barn was large, and they gave me a room at the far end where I stored my things. Then Jack, Jenna, and I had a drink, and I told them my story. Jenna knew Kim quite well from school. She was very surprised by her behavior. She called it irrational. Jack said, "Wait, Brian, I saw something on ESPN recently." He rummaged through his phone. "Yes, here it is. Boxer arrested for assault." He read a short article that said that Jamal had been arrested and charged with assaulting me, his girlfriend's husband. Bail was set at $50,000 and posted. I said, "Fine, but no one knows where I am now. I read about Paxton Farm. I think I'll go there." Jack said, "I know these people. They live 4 miles up the mountain." Jenna said, "Don't they teach some kind of violence?" "Self-defense," I said quietly. "I want to hone some skills." Jack whistled. "Dude, I'm not sure about this." "What's your plan?" "I plan on not getting punched in the face by him anymore. I am capable of this. I just need a little edge." "You're going to find this guy, aren't you?" "This is silly. He is a professional boxer. I really want to meet him at some point." "Jack, you don't know. All of me." "Whatever that means. Okay, I'll take you there tomorrow and introduce you. There is the main older man and his daughter. People come and go." "Great. And how are you doing? Do you have any photos of the baby?" They showed. The next morning, I met Dee Dee. She was lovely. Jack then took me to the farm. Paxton Farm. As we approached, 4 people ran past. The farm had a circular road and a large wooden building. Behind me, I saw houses and another large building. It was made of metal. When we arrived, we were greeted by a man in his 60s and a young woman, perhaps my age. Both were wearing loose tracksuits, sneakers, and beanies. The fact that they were there seemed to me to indicate that they were expecting our arrival. Jack and I got out and approached them. Jack said, "Hello, Manny." "Hi, Jen. This is my college friend, Brian Bixler. He needs help and self-defense training. I thought you might be able to help." The man, Manny, said, "We have 7 people here, and we have room, but we don't just anyone. Perhaps you should come in and explain everything." I said, "I can do it." He invited us into the large building just as the runners returned and started walking back. The place was not luxurious, but well furnished in a simple style. The entrance led to a large room with doorways on either side. There was a balcony around 3 sides of the room, and obviously rooms on that balcony. There was one wood-burning fireplace at each end of the room, both lit. Manny invited us to sit down and asked me to tell my story. I told you. He didn't hide anything. The woman, Jen, asked, "Are you going to become a boxer and fight this guy?" I did not think about that. Maybe I just need to be better prepared in case I run into him. Well, to be honest, I'm actually going to confront him. Manny asked me to stand up. I woke up. He came up to me and carefully examined me from head to toe. He then slapped me with his right hand and immediately tried to do the same with his left. He hit me the first time, but I blocked the second. He retreated. I didn't even touch my face where he hit me. It was a fast and strong blow, but I held his gaze. He smiled. "You can stay." He nodded to Jack. "Thank you, Jack, for remembering us." It was a polite form of farewell, and Jack stood up. "Take care of Brian. If you need anything, Brian, let me know." I nodded, and we took my things out of the truck. Jack drove back down the mountain. Jen came out with us. "Come with me." She said it matter-of-factly. However, I got the impression that she was not happy with me. She led me to a small house behind. On the pole in front of the house was the number 6. She led me inside. It was a small room with a bed, a bathroom, and a desk with a reading lamp. "As long as you're here, you'll be called 6th. We have clients who are interested in maintaining anonymity. You are not part of this, but the number system is universal. Manny and I and the daytime staff can all be called by name." "Fine. I believe that any curiosity about others should remain with me." "Certainly. And your privacy will be respected too." She smiled. Jen was probably my age. Her height was most likely the same as mine. She was slim, but not skinny. She looked strong and fit. She had brown hair in a ponytail and brown eyes. When she smiled, she was very beautiful. I decided to try to make her smile as much as possible within reason. I asked, "Now what?" "Unpack, come to the main building for lunch. We'll have a plan for you by then. I mean, my father." "Fine. Can I look around?" "As far as I understand, it's still a long time before lunch. Lunch at 12:30. You can go wherever you want." I unpacked my things. There was a tracksuit on the bed. I wondered for a moment how it got there and whether it would be the right size for me. I had a laptop and connected it to the network. I found 2 internet connections. One was password protected. I activated my phone. I checked the old phone activity through the computer. There were several reports from the police and Kim's parents. The police just wanted me to go to the prosecutor. Kim's parents wanted to say that she was arrested for making threats over the phone. She could lose her job. Damn, what a shame. I sent my lawyer a text message with the new number. Then I checked Jamal's information. He did not withdraw from the upcoming fight, scheduled for a week later. I went outside and looked around. I was interested in metal buildings. The first door I approached was open. I went inside. The interior was well lit. The 2 men were sparring with each other, if you can call it that. Manny trained them. Both guys were about the same height, 6'2", maybe 190-200 pounds. One was blonde, the other black. None of them were with the group that was running. I watched what they did, and what I saw was quite impressive. They punched and kicked, used elbows and raised knees, but it was all very controlled. They wore protective pads and helmets. Many strike attempts were blocked. At some point, The black man knocked the blonde man to the ground, but he quickly rolled over and stood up. He then landed a good kick to his opponent's thigh. Manny whistled, and they both stopped. Manny clapped his hands. "Very good, both of you. Very good." They walked past me and left the building. They both nodded at me. Manny came up and said, "You see that we are training people for battle. What you saw is an example, but a mild one. Not so soft, perhaps. We try to keep people healthy during training. Tell me how the boxer was able to give you 2 punches. I couldn't resist, and you blocked my second blow. This only happened to me once, so explain." "I'm not sure. I didn't think about it. Of course, he is a professional boxer. I assure you, young man, his blows were no faster than mine. And you had more reason to expect something from him than from me. So, I was excited about the situation. This may have made my reaction worse." "Good answer. But excited? Just excited? Fine. I was full of rage. Without a doubt. A lesson about rage and competence." Manny left through the door. I looked around and found the place to be very well equipped. Dumbbells, cardio machines, something I've never seen before, and a lot of wood splitters. I picked up a 6-pounder. I looked out the window next to the door and saw a huge pile of wood ready to be cut. I went out with a cleaver. There were 2 hours left before lunch. I've always liked chopping wood. This required attention to detail in the wood grain, as well as explosive but precisely directed force. I started with a 20-inch log that I thought was oak. After a few unsuccessful hits, I returned to what I remembered from childhood, and he continued. I was in the zone until I heard the signal. I looked at my watch. Dinner time. I turned towards the main building and saw Manny and Jen watching me. I looked at the pile of wood. There was a large mountain of chopped wood around me. "I'll put them away after lunch." I ran to them. Manny said, "Not necessary. I'll ask someone else to do it. You need to be seen in the training room." He nodded towards the metal building. The 3 of us went there and entered the main building. I washed myself in the restroom and joined a group of men in line for food. Few people spoke. There were 4 tables, and I sat at one with 2 guys who had been practicing in the morning. Manny tapped his glass, and everyone looked at him. "Gentlemen, this is the 6th. He is new here and is a bit of a special case, as he has less experience than our regular students. However, he wouldn't be here if he didn't have the ability, so don't underestimate him." He sat down. Everyone was looking at me. I waved my hand. This caused a wave of laughter. Then everyone went back to eating. The food was good, not fancy. At 1:15, everyone got up and went about their business, clearing away their plates. I went with Manny to the training room. 2 more men walked with us, the 2nd and the 4th. The 2nd was a short and wide guy with black hair. The 4th was taller, but also wide, also with dark hair. They were talking in Slavic as we walked. We went inside, and they headed towards the large carpet, wearing light gloves and protective pads. Manny led me to another part of the hall, where there was another carpet. "I'll show you the basics of what we do here. I want to emphasize that the training is intense and everything is allowed. You understand everything. The first law is survival." "Understood. Survival. Understood." Manny and I put on big gloves and pads. Then he made me repeat his movements. He kicked. Then he punched the air with his fists. He did spins and kicked. He did combinations of kicks and punches, punches and kicks. We had heavy bags. I looked at him and tried to imitate his movements. We worked for an hour. Manny didn't seem tired. I was tired, but I had a lot of stamina and little body fat. He gave me a short break. "You're doing very well. You were able to quickly imitate my movements, so we'll move on to other things. This will require patience, but today you demonstrated it." We approached the bags again. Manny spun around and slammed his elbow into the bag, jumping into the air. The blow struck at head level. It took me 5 tries to do it again. Then the rest of the day, so I can do it every time. At the end, Manny made marks on the bag and told me to hit those spots with my elbow. On the 4th try, I got it right every time after that. When we finished this exercise, Manny turned away for a second, and then I saw him smile as if to himself. I thought about it. What I did didn't seem very difficult to me. I noticed that 2 and 4 had finished their exercises, which seemed to involve actual combat. They were watching us from the other side of the hall. The second one came up. "He's not that new, Manny." He said this in good, but accented English. But he is like that. The 4 of us walked back to the main building. It was 5:30. We spent several hours in the hall. As we approached the building, the second and fourth turned to their houses. Manny told me to take a shower and change into a new sweatsuit for dinner. I was very grateful for the hot water. Dinner was also good. We had cutlets and coleslaw, fresh buns. No dessert, water or milk of your choice. I sat at the table with 7 and 1. They were clearly Americans and knew each other. We chatted about the football season. They were both big enough to play football. They both had blonde hair and were about 6'3". One was slimmer than 7, but not skinny. They seemed sociable, but did not discuss personal details. We decided that the Ravens had an excellent chance to win the championship, but not the Redskins. Dinner ended at 7. As I was walking out to my house, Jen came up to me. "Are you an expert in chopping wood?" "I used to chop a lot when I was younger. It took a little time to get comfortable again, but it's hypnotic and I love it." "Well, when you want to chop wood in your free time, feel free. I've been watching you. It was like ballet, and like a car. I've never seen anything like it." "Thank you." Think, what is my daily schedule? Wake up at 5, jogging, breakfast at 6, at 7 individual lessons until lunch. Tomorrow I'll pick you up for lunch and practice until 5:30 or 5, dinner and evening rest. It's clear. Today I enjoyed studying with your father. What will you teach me? Oh, you'll see. You know, Brian, I think you think everyone can do what you do. Physically, I mean. But you have natural abilities that others don't have. Did you ever play sports, as a child? Not really. Family life was not very good. Sometimes I went to play basketball on the court. Maybe I played table tennis at the IMCA. I was good at these things. But I never thought that I was some kind of super athlete. I'm an ordinary guy. Understood. Did you graduate from college at 19? Jack talked about it. Yes. I passed my matriculation exam earlier so as not to live at home. She turned to me. Brian, you are not an ordinary person. You have to understand this to some extent, and I think you need to keep that in mind. Not to be too self-confident, just to be realistic. Realism is an extremely important thing. We reached my house, and she turned around and left. I watched her leave. I watched carefully. She seemed to sense this because, after walking about 30 yards, she turned and looked straight at me. This look lasted maybe a minute. Then she walked away again. I wonder if she was excited. I did what I needed to do to sleep that night. I got up at 5 because the loudspeaker announced it with a gong. I put on a tracksuit and sneakers and went outside. 4 guys were clearly going for a run. I joined them. There was a path along the side of the mountain. The 1st and 7th were leading. The 5th was behind me, a few yards away. We all ran easily. Then the trail went uphill. 1 and 7 kept up the pace for a while. The 5th, who looked like a runner, fell behind. I stuck with them and then decided to get a real workout. I passed them and continued running to the top of the hill. They arrived within a minute, and 5 was shortly after them. The 7th said, "You seem to have great stamina, 6. I answered, "I used to run a lot. It was a good hill." All 4 of us ran together down the path to the farm. Jen was waiting for me at the house. She motioned for me to follow her. There was a small room attached to the back of the main building. As we approached, I saw all 7 others heading into the training room with Manny. The small room contained a rug and training supplies. Jen began putting on protective pads and gloves. I hesitated, but followed her lead. "We will fight 6. I understand that you may be holding back. If you do that, I'll smear you. I'm not an easy target." "Jen, I mean, is anyone going to get hurt?" No. After a few times, you will understand. Remember the moves you practiced. She took a fighting stance. Hit me. I used the hitting technique that Manny had shown me the day before. Before I realized what had happened, I found myself on the floor. Somehow, she took my hand and threw me off. I looked at her. A slight smile appeared on her face. This is a lesson. You withstood this blow. Every time you do that, you'll end up on the floor looking at me. I wanted to say something obscene, but he restrained himself. I woke up. She resumed her relaxed stance. I used a feint that turned into a kick. She dodged the kick and kicked me hard in the stomach. I dodged. She advanced slowly. There was little room for maneuver. I tried a double strike right-left. I hit her in the shoulder with my left. After that, she kicked me in the head, and I ended up on the floor again. I rolled, but ended up against the wall. She stood over me and waited. I waited, huddled against the wall. My head hurt, but my feet were pressed against a hard surface, so I had support. Suddenly, she took a step to the side and hit me in the chest. I jumped forward and pushed her as I stood up. She actually staggered back, and I followed her, jumping with an elbow strike. I don't know what happened or how, but I ended up on my back and her leg was on my chest. So, she said, you see that I don't need you to feel sorry for me. Maybe it's the other way around for now. She extended her hand and helped me get up. My stomach hurts. I looked at her. It was humiliating. She smiled. You did very well, 6. You made me real. Of course, I could kill you at any moment. I understand this perfectly. It's humiliating. If you were a guy, I would definitely lose my patience. Then you would have shown even worse results. Remaining calm under adverse conditions is a true gift. It seems you have this ability. You lost all those fights to the girl, and yet you are quite calm. I, I, she smiled at me. We will continue training, and your lessons with my father will continue too. You may soon be fighting with others. We continued, and the results remained unchanged. Eventually, I was able to attack and stay on my feet. That afternoon, Manny taught me 2 new maneuvers, subtle variations of the first 2. I also watched 1 and 7 fight, with Jen as referee and mentor. The week went the same way. Jen beat me every morning. During the day, I learned new variations from Manny. I started to make some progress with Jen. I thought carefully about my strengths and weaknesses. Hand-eye coordination was my main strength. I was also fast, especially in my upper body, and I had strength. At my next training session with Jen, I avoided kicking as much as possible. Instead, I attacked with my fists and elbows. At the end of the training, we fought for a long time before she knocked me down. She extended her hand to me. You'll win soon. You thought it over. A little. I looked at her. She was very attractive to me, and I wondered about her apparent lack of male attention. Can you come to my house after dinner? I want to talk to you without violence. At 8:00. I'll come at 8. We can sit on the veranda. She smiled, and we parted ways. At 8:00 sharp, she appeared around the corner of the main house. She was still in her tracksuit, just like me, but her suit was sea green, not gray. I wonder if this was a tribute to style. I like the sea green color. Oh, these are our evening clothes. Mine, at least. She sat down in a rocking chair, and I sat on the chair opposite. I'm a straight man, Jen. I'm very attracted to you. Not because you can kill me in a few seconds. I was just thinking about your life, here and before. She hesitated. I've been doing this with my father since I was 3 years old. He and my mother started this school. My mother got cancer and died 4 months later. I was 12. My father never remarried. I finished school and served in the army for 2 years. There I taught martial arts after basic training. Then I left the army and returned here. I felt that my father needed me for the business since it was thriving, and as he says, good workers are difficult to find. I've been here with him for 4 years. If you're wondering, I'm 24. So what about you? All I know is what happened at the end of your marriage, if it really did end. I explained to her my sad family history and my meeting with Kim and her marriage. She asked, Aren't you wondering what happened? She was a loving wife and suddenly turned into a threat. I thought about it. Her parents told me she was having seizures, but they haven't been since I was 14. I should have asked more probably, but I assumed that she was seduced by the boxer. He is very attractive. That doesn't explain why she was so cruel to you, Brian. She could calmly talk to you and leave. Instead, she subjected you to the deepest humiliation. If I were you, I'd think about it. You have a point. This is very insightful. I'm sure you would have come to this, but you were too close and too emotional. I was able to look at it from the outside, and then it became obvious. But there still remains a mystery about the scene in the house. Yes, a riddle. She smiled at me. Have you abstained since this happened? Oh, yeah. Well, understood. She made a universal hand gesture. She was laughing. I asked, and you, did you find solace in random clients? Yes. Ah, I see. And now? The first and 7 have been satisfying my needs since they arrived. Both then? Straight away? She laughed again. Often the 3 of us come together. But they are leaving at the end of this week, in 2 days. I think I'll need another way out. I stood up and extended my hand to her. She took it, and I led her into the house. She turned to me, and we kissed, passionately on my part at least. She retreated. You can consider this an audition. I don't want to put too much pressure on you. And of course, if you don't handle it well, it could lead to a painful beating. Now she laughed openly at the joke. I wonder if she needed both the first and the 7th to subdue her. Or maybe even they couldn't do it. I was counting on her cooperation. And I received it. Oh, how I got it. We undressed in seconds and found ourselves on the bed. It was like a whirlwind that swept me away. She was almost as strong as me, almost as big. I let her take the lead. After a passionate sex session, we were exhausted. She laid her head next to mine, breathing heavily. It's amazing. Your audition is going very well. Oh, thanks. Will I be saved from being beaten then? For now. We started around 9. For the next 5 hours, we almost never stopped having sex. Never in my life have I had such an experience. Kim was beautiful and spunky, but Jen was several levels higher. After 2 o'clock in the morning, she slipped out of bed, and I got some sleep. But at 5 o'clock, the gong sounded. I got up and went for a morning run. I wasn't as energetic as the day before. I guess the others knew why, but no one commented. There were just some smiles between the other 3 as I fell behind a bit. During the morning fights with Jen, I took a step back. I looked up at her again and again. After almost an hour of this, she helped me get up and said, I see you are distracted and tired. There will be days like this in life. Can you overcome this? I turned away from her and stared at the wall for several minutes, my head completely empty. Then he turned back. We took a fighting stance, and I instantly attacked her, knocking her to the ground. I helped her get up. She looked at me strangely, but resumed her stance. She was the first to attack. I dodged her punch and then her kick. I grabbed her leg and used her momentum to knock her down. I helped her up again. I said, perhaps you were right about me being distracted. We took a stance again. We fought for several minutes before she hit me in the chest and knocked me down. She smiled down at me. It was a great fight. When you are not distracted, you are my equal. You have achieved amazing success. She picked me up, and that was the end of our training for the day. When we left, a crowd had gathered outside. Apparently, they were returning from training, but they stood in a circle around the door. Jen walked past them. I followed her example. I think they were just curious. I turned and asked first why they were there. The last time Jen stayed the night with someone and fought him the next day, the guy was injured. We were curious. You are not injured. By the way, we were expecting her tonight, our last. 7th and me. Will she come? I'm sure she will come. I just don't know with whom. It's her decision. Jen and I had dinner together. She was silent. Then she looked at me. This is their last night. And there are 2 of them and only one of you. Your choice, I respect that. We have time. She smiled at this. She got up and left. I didn't see her until our morning practice. I won all but 2 fights in the first hour. Finally, I said, "Perhaps you are distracted." She looked at me and started laughing. She took her stance again. A few seconds later, I found myself on the ground. She said, "I think you were right." She helped me get up. "This is our last session in a small room. You have progressed enough to fight on the mats. I admit that I enjoyed fighting with you." Such a strange remark, isn't it? But I also liked fighting with her. I simply nodded. That afternoon, Manny taught me some foot movements that set up shots. He then asked me to try out the material on the carpet with Seven in his last session. I looked closely at Manny, but didn't notice anything special about him. Seven and I stood against each other. I was annoyed with him, but I turned to the wall and cleared my head. Then we started. The new leg movements were difficult for me, and Seven had the upper hand at first. But I was calm. I worked on my leg movements, and suddenly it worked. The seventh fell hard. I helped him get up. "Your new movement is very difficult to defend, sixth. When it's done well." The seventh and I fought several more times. He was very creative in his defense and counterattacks. But the new leg movements were difficult for him when I could introduce them. These involved a feint, and then, depending on the reaction, either a straight kick or, if there was a retreat from the front, a circular kick. Or, as I discovered, a circular punch. Manny didn't say anything about it, but it worked well. When we finished, Manny and Seven shook hands, and Seven and I shook hands. On the way to our houses, the seventh said, "She wasn't that involved last night." "Oh, she had a good time, just like us. But she was different. I think it's because of you. I was only with her once, well, one night. I have no right to be jealous. But you were jealous. I saw how you cleared your head. Manny noticed it too. I think he set up the training as a test for you. You've passed." We went our separate ways, and I saw him at dinner that night. 7, Jen and I were sitting at the table. She seemed confused as they approached. The first one said, "Jen, I was so glad to meet you here. I will remember you all my life." "Which may not be that long, perhaps." He smiled. We talked about other things, the 4 of us. She hugged them both when we finished dinner. They left, and I never saw them again. But I've seen a lot of Jen. I spent the next 3 months on the farm. I learned a lot about martial arts. Could fight anyone, including, in the end, Manny. Jen and I were together every night. Among those who came and went, she had no new lovers. The longest stay, besides mine, was a month. A week after I fought Manny, he called me into his office after dinner. "Do you have a plan to meet the boxer?" "No." "Well, not specific. I thought I'd go back and see what would happen." "Brian, I think you could take him out in any street fight. But if this happens, given your past connections, you could be sent to prison. I've seen you and Jen grow closer. She and I don't want to see this, so I have an idea." "Which?" He explained his plan. The next week I got up early, got in the car after a run and drove to Mountain City to the gym by the railroad tracks. It was a boxing club and training center owned and operated by Jenks Martin, a former boxer. Jenks was nearly a middleweight champion and had a great reputation as a trainer. He had local fighters and 2 who competed nationally. One, Jerry Totham, was a light heavyweight. The other was a welterweight. I met with Jenks in his office. Manny talked to him about me. Jenks had a plan. I changed my clothes and started with a light bag. Then a heavy bag, jumping rope. At the end of the day, I had a round with a local heavyweight. Jenks told me not to hit him, just stay away from his punches. I did it. Despite my training on the farm, I was tired. Jen asked about everything, and I told her. It was 2 weeks before Jenks got me a light heavyweight fight. It was a professional fight, but a club one. I registered as BB Farmer. Jenks told me to throw a lot of punches, but not to knock him out if possible. It was a 3-round fight. I easily beat the guy Larry Bonds many times. He practically didn't touch me, only on my hands. I won by unanimous decision. Every day I trained with Jenks, slept with Jen, and lifted weights. I also chopped wood a lot, stocking up for future use. I eventually became a sparring partner for a real professional light heavyweight who was trained by Jenks. His name was Rashar Jones, and he brought me to my senses. He could have hit me. I could also hit him. He hit harder. For some time, I started working on what I had seen him do, which was a series of punches delivered in quick succession. I had fast hands for this. I increased the work with the heavy bag. After 2 months, I could spar with him on equal terms. At that time, I had 10 fights locally and 2 more in another state. I won them all, 9 on points. One guy annoyed me in a fight in another state. I knocked him out in the second round. He was a show-off and thought he could make fun of me. Apparently, he had succeeded in this before. But with me, it was a mistake. I was now an undefeated professional. Jenks asked me if I thought I was ready. For what? To Jamal Bennett. He puts on a series of fights with not very strong opponents every month. He knocks them all out. You'll be next in line next month. Okay, but what do you think? I agreed to the fight. You will be paid $4,000 plus expenses. Okay, I'm looking forward to it. For 6 weeks before the fight, I studied fight tapes and trained with the guys Jenks found. I felt a growing anger as I watched the video. I had to hold back during sparring. Jenks warned me several times. We were heading to Washington for a fight. Jenks, Manny, Jen, and me. Bennett was a big star in Washington and ranked high among the light heavyweights. We stayed at a nice motel. The fight was scheduled for Friday in a large hall with 5,000 seats. It was almost full. Our fight was the main event, advertised as a battle of undefeated fighters. Up until this point, I had heard little or nothing about Jamal Bennett and my now ex-wife. There was nothing in the newspapers, and no one from my former circle knew where I was. Bennett and his team didn't take me seriously, but the fight was supposed to bring him money. There was television, albeit cable. Manny pulled me aside while I was getting ready. Your wife is here. Looks like she has the baby with her. She'll be at ringside. Does she know I'm the one fighting? I don't know. I'm sure someone on Bennett's team would recognize you, or he himself. He probably watched the video. You know, I only saw him once, and not for long. I think I'll find out when we meet in the center. I entered the ring to loud whistles. Bennett was a local favorite. I put on my hood and stayed in my corner. Jenks was my second. Manny and Jen were at ringside. Bennett entered the ring with great fanfare. I watched him carefully from under the hood. He was a show-off. I was filled with rage when I saw him. I turned away and stared into space. I felt calm come over me. We were called to the center of the ring for the traditional pre-fight introduction. I left the hood on my head. I could see that Bennett had no idea who I was. He was jumping and screaming. I saw Kim at ringside. There was a child with her. I took off my hood and smiled at her as the gong sounded. I saw the shock on her face when I turned away. Bennett came out throwing punches that couldn't touch me but looked impressive. He had a habit of moving back and forth in front of his opponent. He had rhythm. It was a weakness because it could have been predicted. In the first minute, he got into his rhythm, and so did I. His jabs and one right hand missed their mark. When he ducked to the right in rhythm, I hit him with 2 strong jabs and a lightning-fast right cross. The right punch hit him square in the cheek. He staggered. I felt rage rise within me. I drove him to the ropes and hit him in the body. Right, left along the ribs. Right on the kidney. Brutal left to the ribs. I felt him weaken. I stepped back and hit him in the jaw with my right hand, sending him flying into the ropes. I saw that he was unconscious, but when he bounced off the ropes and began to fall, his head was right in front of me. I could have killed him with another right hand. I felt rage the same as always in my life, but I held back the blow. He fell to the canvas, unconscious. I stood there for a second and looked at Kim, who was looking in shock. I tensed my muscles. I silently said, "Bitch." I then turned and walked to my corner, through the ropes and out of the ring. The 4 of us immediately headed to the locker room. I didn't take a shower. Manny was waiting for us outside with a van containing all of our stuff. We got into it and left. No press, no television. Manny drove us back to the farm. It was about a 2-hour drive, and we were full of joy when we left the arena. There was beer for Jenks and me. When we were about half an hour from the farm, Manny took advantage of the pause and asked me, "Why didn't you hit him one last time, Brian? I saw the rage that took over you when you drove him to the ropes." "I'm not sure, Manny. There he is, a dead bastard. I didn't mean to kill him. I'll have to think about why." Jen said, "That's good, Brian. Either way, he's definitely hurt a lot. Enough." It was a free kick, completely legal. I'm confused. "Well," she said, "they'll offer you money to fight. Do you want to fight?" "I don't know. I have enough money. Business is good, and I could sell it for a lot of money, but I like to fight." "You could be a champion. Nowadays, though, it's not the same as when Ollie and Frazier fought." "I'll think about it. I like MMA." She laughed. "I'm sure. You're a killer." "Looks like I'm not a killer." We arrived at the farm and unloaded our things. Jenks was supposed to stay the night. We were all in the main house, and Jen and I were heading upstairs when Jenks turned on ESPN. It was there. All 90 seconds of the fight. The caption on the video said I knocked Bennett out and then disappeared. We all laughed. Our reason for fleeing was a possibly very hostile crowd, including Bennett's friends. I felt exhausted, but the sight of the fight was fascinating to me. I looked, and it was like I was there again, but also like I couldn't believe it was me. They showed a slow-motion video of the knockout. I was there, and I wasn't there when I watched. Slowly, then quickly, I had to sit down. As I watched the moment when I could have killed him, I focused on my face. I saw the rage disappear. In an instant, she was there. The next, she was gone, replaced by an emptiness close to despair. I didn't feel despair as far as I remembered, but that's exactly what it looked like in the video. Then I saw my tension as I looked at Kim. My face remained blank, as if I had planned this in advance and was going through the motions. I remembered leaving the ring, but not the tension. For me, it was foggy. It seemed to dissipate as I headed to the locker room. I saw myself galloping at the end of the path. Jen held my hand. I realized that I was holding her hand tightly. We looked at each other. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I stood up and pulled her along with me. "It's time to sleep." I whispered it. I needed her to be with me. Manny and Jenks said nothing. By this time, Jen and I were deeply in love. We knew this and talked about it. This was something more than I had ever felt for Kim. We undressed and took a shower together, but without sexual play. I put on light pajamas and she put on a nightgown. We hugged. She asked, "How did you feel when you watched the video?" I felt alienated from myself, from the person who was fighting. I felt alienated, but I knew it was me. "I've been thinking about your path here. I think you need to deal with Kim, understand why she acted the way she did. You said her parents said she had mental health problems in her youth that they never mentioned. I don't want to see her. She has a child with him. She hurt me so much. And it was all of a sudden, like I never meant anything to her. She filed for divorce so quickly." "But Brian, she was your wife for a while, and there were no hints until she showed up with the boxer. How could that be? I think you will always be insecure, maybe even in us, if you don't find a solution. Maybe you should see her parents." "I'll think about it. I can't just show up to them. As far as I know, Kim lives there." "Let's find out tomorrow, okay?" "Yes, okay." The next day, Jen and I did a few things. First, we checked on Bennett. He was still in the hospital, not life-threatening, but possibly disabled. Then we found out about Kim. It appears that she and Bennett lived together in a condominium in Virginia. There was mention of a child, but no details or photographs. ESPN published an article about Bennett's rise and the fight. At one point, Kim was shown hugging him after his victory. They said Bennett's future in boxing was uncertain. I decided to call Kim's parents. They lived in the suburbs of Washington. John worked as a civilian employee at the Pentagon. Eileen was a high school math teacher. She answered the phone when I called at lunchtime. "Hi, Eileen, it's Brian." "Oh, Brian, why are you calling now? This is not a good time." "Eileen, I'm sorry he got hurt, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. I, I still don't understand what happened between Kim and me. I feel like I need some kind of explanation, but I don't want to see her." "I see. We told you that Kim had problems in her youth. We believed that they were behind us. But this is not so. Let me talk to John to see if he agrees to talk. I will call you back. At this number." "Yes, thank you." Kim and I went about our business. She kept the phone nearby in case they called. Reporters showed up at the farm. We should have seen this coming. They were not allowed into the territory, but some clients were nervous, and Manny was nervous. I called a friend who knew more about public relations. He advised that the press would pester us until they got more information. They hate secrets, or love them because it increases ratings, but they need to be revealed. I sent Jenks to the gate. I arranged a meeting with the press in his hall at 5 in the evening. Kim's parents called back at this time. I arranged to have dinner with them at a hotel in Washington 2 days later. I thanked them for this. Jenks and I were discussing how to hold a press conference. Jenks and I entered the hall a little after 5. There were video cameras and flashes. I had a prepared statement. I said I hoped Bennett would be okay. I also said that I have no plans for the next fight yet. Finally, I expressed my gratitude for the opportunity to fight a major contender. There were questions. How did I feel when I knocked him out? Numbness. Did I believe in my victory before the fight? Yes. Do I think I can beat the champion? I've never seen him fight. Why did I tense my muscles when he fell? I don't remember doing this. He was probably just happy and celebrating. Why did I say bitch? I don't remember this. Have I spoken to Bennett's girlfriend? No. Lie. Am I ready to give Bennett his revenge? Not sure. I don't know if he wants this. At this point, Jenks interrupted and ended the press conference. We went to the main hall. When we went to the conference, we entered through a side door. But now, when we entered the main hall, there were many guys there who were training. I was greeted with applause. True, with muted gloves. There were also exclamations. I smiled and bowed. I got a friendly hit. Later, when I was thinking about whether to continue, I took these guys into account. I was driven back to the farm by Jenks' driver. Jen looked and said I looked stupid. I told her that was exactly the effect I wanted to have. After all, I was a club fighter, and I tried not to attract much attention. She and I went to the mat. Literally, we had a good fight, which I barely won. She hurt me more than Bennett. We had a nice dinner in the main room, and the guys present applauded me. I waved my hand. Jen and I went upstairs and watched an old James Garner movie. Then we went to bed. I got training again. Dinner with Kim's parents made me anxious. I asked Jen to come with me. We had a reservation for 7 and stayed overnight. John and Eileen arrived on time. I shook his hand and hugged Eileen, introduced Jen as his companion. Eileen looked a little depressed. We ordered drinks, and I asked, I still don't understand what happened to my marriage. I was too depressed and ashamed to ask before. But Jen says I need to figure this out somehow, and I agree. I hope you can help. Eileen said, Brian, Kim loved you. I think she still does. But she's had volatile episodes before. She had a nervous breakdown when she was 13. She spent some time in the hospital. Came out, returned to school. About a year later, she attacked a boy in her class. She hit him with a bat. She was sent to the hospital again, and she recovered. John interrupted, until she started a massacre. I consider it a relapse. She seemed depressed a month before this incident. I'm guessing she was already sleeping with Bennett. She brought him to us 2 weeks before the incident. John and I were very surprised and upset. She said she was dating him. She promised to tell you everything. She didn't seem crazy then. He didn't say much. Have you thought of telling me? She said she would say everything herself. That's why we didn't. We had no way to foresee what she would do. How are they doing now? I heard she lives with him. Yeah, she and little Johnny live with him. He's not a thug, Brian. I don't know about the beatings, but from what we see and know, he's not a thug. Eileen seemed sincere. Well, I can't wish them happiness. How much, Johnny? There was a pause. John said, he's 11 months old. Oh, so she must have been pregnant when she brought him in. Do pregnant women suffer from such relapses more often? Another pause. Eileen shook her head. We don't know. She hasn't shown any signs of breakdown since the incident, Brian. Just this incident. But it was terrible. Jen listened to all of this carefully. She's smarter than me. She asked, do you have any pictures of Johnny? Oh, well, no, not here. Not on phones? Jen asked. Her tone was harsh. I began to understand. I said, Eileen, is there something I need to know? John? Silence. Jen said, it's your son, Brian, not Bennett's. For some reason, they don't want you to know about it. She turned to them. Why? Kim says it's really Jamal's baby. He'll be the one to raise him. She told us not to say anything. God, Brian, he looks just like you. I said, I need to process this. I won't just leave. I can't believe she would do that. After the beating, maybe. But this is just terrible. John said, Brian, I feel for you. I really do. But what good will come of intervening? Well, I'll be able to get to know my son, and after what they did, I might be able to get some form of custody. At this point, the waiter came over and asked if we were ready to order. I hesitated, but then decided to continue. First of all, I was hungry. We ordered everything. This process seemed to ease the tension at the table. Jen asked me, what do you know about the divorce? What did she say about the pregnancy? I looked at John and then at Eileen. She said, Lawyer Kim sent you the papers. There was no mention of a child. There was no child then. When he was born, Jamal's name was on the birth certificate. The divorce was already finalized by then. You know, we all assumed it was his child, not yours. She was with him many times in a month and not so much with you. True. I guess it's true. Maybe twice with me. What kind of relationship does she have with Jamal? By now, he should have realized that he is not the father. He found out shortly after the birth. He went away for a week. Then he came back and stayed with them. He doesn't change diapers. We haven't been with them much time to say more. Okay, that doesn't tell me much. Any news on his condition after the fight? He's hurt. He's having trouble speaking clearly. The doctors say it'll probably go away with rest. You hurt him badly, Brian. How do you feel about it? I'm glad I won. I could have killed him, you know. Did you watch the fight? John said, I watched. I watched it live. I watched the video. I know you could have killed him when he bounced off the ropes, but you didn't. And I don't know why, even now. I hated him. But he got what he deserved. There are doubts whether he will get paid after this. His sponsors are concerned about his physical condition, but he is contractually insured against injury. So maybe. Jen said, Did you talk to Kim after the fight? No, just by phone. Johnny is with us now, Brian, at our house with the nanny. Then they brought food. It was a nice restaurant, but I barely touched my food. Jen ate hers and then most of mine. My appetite disappeared. We ate mostly in silence. Then I said, I want to see the pictures now. Eileen took out her phone. She had a lot of photos and videos. They ate dessert and I watched. We ordered coffee. I continued to watch. Jen looked over my shoulder as she finished the pie. He's adorable, she said. Of course. Eileen, John, I won't leave it like this. He loves his mom and dad, Brian. You saw it on the video. I saw. We'll stay here overnight. Tomorrow I want to meet Johnny. What can be arranged? John said, Kim doesn't know you're here. I feel bad that we're doing this behind her back. I'll leave it up to you. But I have options, including DNA. But looking at it, there's no doubt. I can go to court. They committed fraud on the birth certificate. Or if it's wrong, I can correct it. If possible, I don't want to involve lawyers. Okay? Why don't you come over for lunch tomorrow? Johnny will be there. And so they did. When Jen and I went up to our room, we ordered wine. We didn't drink anything at dinner since they were teetotalers. She asked, "What are our options?" "We need to consult someone who knows the laws of Virginia. I know Harry Bacon works across the river. I'll call him in the morning." "How do you feel about all this, Jen?" "You know, I should feel threatened, but I don't. I'm sure of your love. Everything else is just details." "I love you, Jen. You're the best." "Oh, and what about the mother of your child?" I laughed. I loved her, but it was never like that with you. The next day at lunchtime, we went to John and Eileen's house in the suburbs. They met us at the door and led us into the living room, where little Johnny was playing on the floor with wooden blocks. He looked at us. Eileen said, "Johnny, this is Brian and Jen. They came to see you and have lunch." Johnny looked at us and went back to playing with the blocks. I crouched down and picked up one of the cubes, stacked it on top of his tower. Then another one and another one until you got a tall tower. Johnny looked at her carefully. He knocked her down with one blow. He laughed and laughed while I said, "Oh no." I started stacking the cubes again. He waited until the tower was high enough and I stood back to look. He knocked down the tower again, laughing. We played this game for a while, and then another with an accordion that was nearby. I would pull or push the instrument, and he would press buttons to create different sounds. Lunch was announced. I stood up, and so did he. He walked uncertainty. I extended my hand, and he took it. We went to the dining room, where Eileen sat him in a high chair. He ate bread with peanut butter and celery. The adults ate quiche. Eileen's phone rang. She went into the kitchen. When she returned, she said, "It was Kim. Jamal is being transferred to a rehabilitation center, the one on the next street. She will come here when he is settled." I was under the impression that she would be here in 30 minutes. They are already at the facility. I looked at Jen. She said, "There's no reason to put things off. We can all see that Brian wants to be a part of Johnny's life." John said, "I agree, but prepare for some disagreement." Eileen, seeing that Johnny had eaten all his dinner, took him upstairs to put him to bed. The three of us discussed how things could go. John was supposed to meet Kim at the curb and inform her of our presence. Then a car drove up to the house. Eileen went downstairs without Johnny. Jen and I watched as Kim got out of the car. She looked tired, but good. Her father met her as she entered the gate. We watched them talk. Kim jerked her head and looked at the house. She shook her head no. The discussion continued for some time. Eileen came out to talk. After a few seconds, all three turned and entered the house. Kim was between her parents. I said, "Hi, Kim. This is Jen." "You son of a bitch. Bastard. You hurt Jamal badly." "Hurt him." She didn't speak loudly, but she spoke confidently. "I hurt, but not as much as I could have. And you know, Kim, you're not the one who can talk. Retribution is a bitch, right?" She lowered her head. She was silent for about 20 seconds. Then she raised her eyes, tears in them. "Apparently, this is all my fault. I was wrong, and he was wrong. What we did was wrong. I can't explain. Completely. I fell in love with him on the dance floor and fell in bed. Hobby, and I knew I was ruining everything." "But why did you want him to beat me? Why humiliation?" "Brian, I was afraid that you would do what you did hurt him. I know you, Brian. You have it. I think I was trying to get ahead of you. It was wrong." Worst day of my life. But I looked at Jen. Everything turned out very well for me. I'm happy. I doubt I can completely forgive you, and you hid Johnny from me. Everything is in the dark. I don't want you in his life, Brian. Jamal is his dad. He was always there. Only because you didn't tell me. It was obvious. I'll do whatever it takes to be in his life, Kim. She walked away. She knew she would have to give in. Besides, she was in a state because of Jamal. She turned and said, Jamal was seriously injured. He has a bad concussion, maybe something else. Tests have shown that he can recover with time. How did you become such a good boxer, Brian? He's one of the best in the country. I had motivation and expert help. I looked at Jen again. Besides, he thought I was another bum of the month. He wasn't ready. Eileen said, let's all go into the living room and sit down. Kim, do you need anything? Maybe some water, thank you. She looked at me and Jen. None of us knew that Jamal would fight you, Brian. I had no idea until you took off that robe. You had a different name. When I saw it was you, I was very scared. I wanted to stop the fight, but it ended too quickly. You called me a bitch. Yes, if the shoe fits. Revenge. All revenge. Now what? I don't know. My motives have changed. Jen and I will decide. Maybe mostly her. This is strange territory for me. Johnny too. We discussed it some more, and then Kim went upstairs to sleep. She needed it. Jen and I returned to our hotel and picked up our things. We moved into a hotel not far from the Clark's house. Jen called Manny to tell him we'd be back in 2 days. She told him about Johnny. When she hung up, she said, Manny is excited to see Johnny. He's not as stoic as he seems. The next morning, I consulted with a child custody lawyer in the state. I returned to the Clark's house with some knowledge. I was hoping that we could come up with something. Jen and I discussed the idea of Johnny spending some time on the farm. She said Kim would probably have to go with him for now, or maybe Eileen and John. Apparently, Kim also consulted with a lawyer about Johnny and custody. She wasn't harsh about me seeing him. While we were talking, Jen was playing with him on the floor. When he knocked down the first tower she built, she caught it with both hands and tilted it back. Kim and I watched. It was an amazing achievement. Johnny was not impressed. He knocked down the tower again, and it fell. We agreed that Eileen and Johnny would come with us to the farm for a week. Then we'll see. Kim will deal with Jamal. He didn't want Johnny to see him at that moment. Johnny stayed at the farm for 2 weeks. He was everyone's favorite. Eileen and Johnny had a room in the main building and ate with everyone else. Eileen was not indifferent to the attractive men around. She flirted, but that was all she stopped. Johnny began to walk, then run. Jen and I entertained him after dinner, and Manny had fun with him too. But it was a business, and Manny, Jen, and I had to run it. Manny decided to hire another instructor. He had someone in mind. Chin Young. He was an American like the rest of us. He was educated in Pennsylvania, had military experience, and trained fighters in the military and for the federal government. He was 34, but looked 20. He came from Pittsburgh for the interview. We all liked him, and he accepted the offer on the spot. It took him 2 weeks to complete the business. As he walked away, he turned to me. You fought the other day. Well, it looked like you. It was me. It's a long story. It'll be interesting to hear someday. He smiled and left. Chin's nickname was, incredibly, Rob. I was interested to know about this. I doubted that this was a completely innocent thing. As he was leaving, Eileen appeared. She said hello, and Rob smiled at her. She answered him with a slightly seductive smile. I started to think about her. Kim may have been the apple that didn't fall far from the tree. Jen and I drove Eileen and Johnny back to Virginia. When we arrived, Kim was there, and she and Johnny shared a big hug. It was touching, and if it weren't for our story, I would have been moved. But, not so much now. However, I was still very interested in what she would say if we talked. And we talked. After Johnny calmed down, it turned out that John had prepared dinner. It had to be served at 6 so we could leave for Mountain City. This left 2 hours for communication. Jen pulled me aside and said, "It's time to talk to her. You know it needs to be done. Maybe, if she agrees. I think she needs to do this too. Just go and invite her into the backyard. So I did. I walked over to where she and Eileen were playing with Johnny. Hey, Kim, can we go outside and talk? She looked scared. Fine. She stood up, and we went out into the backyard. I said, I thought we needed to talk. About Johnny, maybe, but really, I'd like to understand what happened. Me too. She started crying. I, I started sleeping with Jamal. I mean, he's handsome. Well, he was before that, and maybe I've always had a soft spot for black guys. So when he hit on me at the bar, I was more than tempted. And when we did it, it was amazing. You just fell in love with him right away? Yes, it's not your fault. You and I made a great couple, but I've always had a restless personality. Were we doomed to fail? It's unfortunate, Kim, but I can understand. Basically, what you're saying is that you've always been easy to get to. I'm sorry. She smiled. But I can't understand why you wanted to humiliate me. I thought about it a lot. I felt so bad that I cheated on you with Jamal. I felt guilty all the time, and I knew for sure that I would continue to cheat. It was exciting, so I felt more guilt. I think I started to blame you. I thought it was your fault, and that made me feel even more guilty because you were so kind to me. She shrugged, but I thought it made sense, in a weird, twisted way. It wasn't a psychotic break. Not the same as before. I hope I grew out of it. It was like I was making excuses for my screwed-up behavior. Otherwise, I only had myself to blame. But it was definitely crazy. Yes, and that made me determined to take revenge. Yeah, you can get rich in boxing. You should be thanking me. You know, Jamal's probably done. He doesn't think so, but I am. What are we going to do about Johnny? We shouldn't fight for custody if we can avoid it. Share your time in some way. How long can you be away from your new place? Not much, but we hired a new guy. Actually, I was thinking about buying a property next to the farm, a defunct ski resort. If I do that, I might offer you a place. I don't know about you and Jamal, though. I'm not going to just leave him. He's a whiner right now. It annoys me. Tell me, why did he agree to carry out the massacre? When you two stood at the door later, it seemed like he was the one who pulled you away. Well, Brian, Jamal has rage inside him. Rage like I saw in you when you beat him. You should have seen it in his boxing. No, he fought guys he could easily beat. He didn't need his rage. He has a rage against. What? Not me, specifically. Against guys like you. He grew up in the inner city. Bullies have bullied him since he was 9. I see. Okay. Wrong place, wrong time. I told him to beat you. I didn't know he'd go that far. I asked him about it later. He said that's what happened. When we finished talking, I thought I began to understand what had happened. She had characteristic flaws that I did not immediately see. She was easily accessible. There is no other way to say it. But complex, with a conscience that drove her to hatred. Incredible. We ate. John was a good cook. It turned out that he was cooking most of the time, plus work. I wondered what Eileen did when she could cook. Later, on the way home, I brought up the topic of Kim with Jen. It turned out that she went up to the second floor and listened to our conversation through the open window. She said, "This is the closest thing to the truth you'll get." Yes, so what are we going to do with Johnny? And Jen, will you marry me? I love you so much. I was going to wait, but after this conversation, I feel liberated. Brian, she cried. Yes, you should ask me while you're driving. I'll make you pay for it. She laughed through her tears. We got married on Saturday, a month later. It was a small ceremony on a farm. I couldn't find my mother to invite her. Manny had a sister who came with her husband and 2 almost adult children. John, Eileen, and Johnny were there. Kim decided not to come, although Jen insisted that we invite her. Jen and I took a short honeymoon on the beach in Delaware. Then they returned to work. I signed a contract to fight a light heavyweight contender. I should have been paid $200,000. It was because I was a mysterious guy and, like Rocky, a club fighter. The fight was supposed to take place in a month. Regardless of who won, the money had to fund the purchase I wanted to make. I consulted with Jen, Manny, and Jenks about the solution and the training I would need. We made a routine and I followed it. Jenks believed that abstinence from sex would be necessary. Jen rejected this. I trained and went to Philadelphia for the fight. The opponent was Rick Sutter. He was almost my height, with a shaved head and a defiant, cocky style. Jenks and I studied the video. He fought 34 times and won all but one. This isn't a boxing story, so I'll just say the fight went all 12 rounds and I wore him down. I didn't come out of the fight unscathed like I used to. My body hurt for 2 weeks from clenching with this guy. I knocked him down once in the 10th round with a right cross. I thought he was knocked out, but he got up. Gong saved him, and he recovered enough to finish the fight. He was a really tough fighter, and I admired him even despite his showboating. After the fight, I quickly held a press conference, saying that I didn't know if I would continue to fight, and I returned to the farm. I called a realtor about an abandoned ski resort. 52 acres, lodge, and cabins. It was used as a summer camp for the Inca, so the buildings weren't too shabby. With $150,000 from the fight after taxes, I was able to buy it outright using some of my savings. I also made a deal to sell my business. It did very well, and I sold it to the employees in a complex transaction that left me with some cash and ongoing semi-annual payments. Now I am a landowner. For Manny, Rob turned out to be a very good worker. He more than made up for my absence from boxing. He had a close friend named Billy Williams. They had been friends since their army days and had similar experiences. Manny also hired him. Things were going well. Guys came and went, and everyone paid. It always amazes me that Manny's business model works. But I never asked too many questions. What really made him successful was Manny's ability to teach. There were a lot of people like Rob and Billy, but only one Manny. Once the hype around my boxing died down a bit, I found myself back at peace on the farm with Jen. And then, as if fate didn't like me being happy, Kim broke up with Jamal. She moved back in with her parents and seemed happy with it. But not for long. She came to the farm with little Johnny after the new year. We put them in the room upstairs, a small room. Then the three of us, Manny, Jen, and I discussed what to do with her. I got up and took her to another place for a private conversation. I asked, "What happened to Jamal?" He thought I was bringing him bad luck. You know, he was never a permanent thing. He was he was too handsome and young. I see. So what now? I thought, I thought Johnny needed you in his life, his dad. And even though I love my parents, I don't want to live with them. I thought maybe there was a job and a place for me here. Let me think, Kim. You know, that trick is still eating at me. Hell, more than eating at me. Okay, I'm not a fighter, but I can organize things and I have a quick mind. For practical matters, I can apologize all I want, but I'm truly sorry. After all, you left me because of your pretty face. More than just a pretty face, boy, she started laughing. Not so handsome now. I laughed too, and she didn't stop. I asked, "How is he now?" "He's mostly recovered from rehab. He's starting to get back into the gym. He wants to fight the guy you just fought." Okay, I'm not very interested. He gave out blows, then he received them. The score is tied, except for you. I'm not kidding about settling down here. I want to pay for my stay if I stay. I talked to Manny and Jen again about Kim. Jen didn't mind if she stayed. Manny looked at me and asked, "What about you, Brian? Can you see her around?" "Yeah, because of Jen. She set me up, and I'm a much better person for it." "What can she do for work?" "She's smart. She's in good shape, but she doesn't know anything about what we do here. She studied business and accounting." Manny said, "What are your plans for ski camp?" "I'm going to renovate it and try to revive it as a destination for nature and fitness enthusiasts. Trails, swimming, rafting, archery, and so on. And you need someone to organize the renewal, settlements, borrowings, etc. Can she help with that?" Jen said she could live in one of the houses. So we agreed. I took another fight to make some money. He was with the #1 contender in New York. This guy was Rodrigo Sanchez. I realized that I would have to work hard not to be overwhelmed by him. Jenks, and sometimes Manny, helped me. We studied videos of all his fights. It was frighteningly powerful. Again, the fight lasted all 12 rounds. Again, I knocked my opponent down, this time in the 9th round. But he stood up angry, and he returned the favor to me at the end of the round. This really made me angry. I did a calming exercise in my corner. My head cleared, but I decided to crush this guy. Well, it turned out to be much more difficult than anything I had experienced before. He was angry too, and contrary to all my training, I exchanged blows for the rest of the fight. No one fell, but there were a lot of hits. For me, this meant that I cornered the guy and hit him in the body. I had rage, there was no doubt about it. Later, I realized that the crowd was standing and roaring. But when this happened, all I saw was this guy, just him and me. That was all. I ended the 12th round beating him up in the corner. I didn't even hear the gong. The referee had to pull me away. I looked at Sanchez. I was amazed that he was standing, but he looked at me. I nodded, and so did he. The fight was judged a draw. Later, when I rewatched it, I thought that was fair. At that moment, I didn't care, and that's what I really thought. If the fight had lasted 15 rounds, I would have won, or maybe would have died trying. We couldn't go home after that. We had rooms in a nearby hotel. I had to be checked by a doctor before leaving the arena. Sanchez was taken to the hospital, but he did not stay long. He had a broken rib. I slept restlessly after the fight, then slept in the van all the way back to the farm. Then I slept for another 18 hours. When I woke up, it was morning, and after checking my body, I realized that it hurt, but I could function. There was no press conference after the fight because neither of us could attend. Jenks organized it again in his hall for 5 in the evening. Before I went down there, Manny, Jen, and Jenks and I watched the whole fight. In the end, I think we all accepted the draw. If I had avoided the knockdown at the end of the 9th round, I would have won. I won the last 3 rounds. All judges rated the 9th as a draw. Before the press conference, Jen and I discussed whether I wanted to continue fighting. Her opinion was that Sanchez was the best fighter I would ever meet. She didn't care about the champion. She said Sanchez would beat him, and then I can make a fortune fighting Sanchez again. I said, "You know, Jen, this fight was so completely exciting to me. In the final moments, there was nothing else in the world, just the fight. I might get addicted to it, but I would end up with a lot of damage. You came out of that fight okay, but I'm worried. If you take another fight, it has to be the last one. We've earned enough. In fact, we've already earned enough." I started the press conference with a statement praising Sanchez and wishing him luck in his fight with the champion. I meant every word. I think we developed a kind of connection during the fight. There were many questions about the fight, which was called a classic. My answers about the first 8 rounds were analytical. All I could say about the 9th and 12th rounds was, those rounds were such a pleasure. Not a pleasure, really, a reward. Just hard to describe. I'll never forget it. Well, unless I get hit in the head too many times. Everyone laughed at this. Jen didn't find it that funny. I again received applause from the guys in the audience. I gave them a little thank you speech. Then we had a little party. Life returned to normal on the farm. I talked to Kim about hiring her to start a new venture. She was excited, but also scared. She said, "How can you trust me with this after what happened?" "Because we're not married. You're free to hook up with anyone except Jen. This is business. I trust you because that's what you're good at." "Okay, I can say this, Brian. I want more than anything to not let you down." She cried a little when she said this. I believed she was sincere at that moment. We called the new venture Mountain Adventures. Kim was interviewing for a construction manager, and we hired Harvey Bristol Harv. He was 40 and had experience not only in restoring buildings, but also in landscaping. We all thought he was perfect. The only thing that bothered me a little about Harv was that he had gone through a bad divorce the year before. He and his wife shared custody of 2 teenagers. I was afraid that he might be distracted. I discussed this with Kim before offering him the job. I'm a little worried about his family situation. He might still be wrapped up in it. I think I can. Ease his pain, Brian. He was a big, masculinely handsome guy with dark hair and stocky. I smiled at Kim. You mean you're going to seduce him? I don't think it'll take too much seduction. I like him. I want him. So I'll take him. I hope you don't mind, Brian. It won't interfere with business. Just make sure it doesn't get in the way. And Kim, you can't let him down. It would be bad for business. Can I trust you? Yes. Kim wasted no time. Harv was amazed by her. He had no chance. He moved into the back room of the cabin she was using as an office for the project. I have to say that Harv's mood improved significantly thanks to Kim's intervention. And Kim was in a better mood too. I assumed they worked just as well in bed as they did in the project. 2 Harwa teenagers worked on the project during the summer, doing general construction work. They were 15 and 16, but they had already worked with their father and knew how to complete the tasks. They were good workers. They lived mainly with their mother in the city. I heard them making fun of Harv about Kim. He quickly stopped it. Things were going well on all fronts. But of course, anything can happen. Jen and I decided to have her stop taking birth control pills, and she quickly became pregnant. Then Kim also became pregnant. She and Harv were happy. I don't know if they planned this, but I was sure that she was planning. Meanwhile, Eileen and John came to the farm to visit Johnny and Kim. We all had a big dinner in the Mountain Adventures cafeteria. Little Johnny was now fully integrated into our lives. Eileen and John had a room in the main building on the farm. They were supposed to stay for 2 weeks. On the second night of their stay, I got up to pee at midnight, and as I walked past Manny's room, I heard obvious sounds of sex. The next morning I asked Jen about it, but she didn't have any concrete ideas. For me, there was only one woman in the building other than Jen, Eileen. I asked Kim about this later. Oh, of course, Mom and Manny hit it off right away at dinner. When they left, I was sure she would lure him in. Now you see where I get it from. Oh my God, Kim, what about your father? He doesn't care, Brian. Mom has her own needs, and he can't always satisfy them. Sometimes he likes to watch. At least that's what she tells me. Damn it. Exactly, she laughed. My observations of John and Eileen during their stay led me to believe that neither Eileen nor John ever slept in their room during the visit. I could tell that Manny's mood seemed less stoic when Eileen was around. After their first visit, John and Eileen became regular guests at the farm. All attempts to be discreet ceased when they arrived a second time. Things were going well. The project and pregnancy were in good condition. Sanchez then won the championship in a convincing victory. Jen reminded me that she predicted this. I took part in one fight in Pittsburgh to keep in shape. I held the guy for 4 rounds and then knocked him out in the 5th. We all had a meeting at Mountain Adventures about whether I should take the Sanchez title fight. By all of us, I mean Jen, Manny, Jenks, Kim, Harv, and me. Both Kim and Harv were confident that the allocated funds would be enough to complete the project. So if I take the fight, it won't be so much about the money. Manny was neutral. Jenks was vehemently in favor. He told me that I could become a champion. For him, it was like the Holy Grail. He never reached it. He thought I could. Jen looked at me after everyone had spoken. I know you will, Brian. I have my fears, but you are who you are. This must be the last fight, win or lose. Agree. I saw a small smile on Manny's face as Jenks jumped for joy. The fight was scheduled for March in Las Vegas. I was going to make a lot of money. Meanwhile, the pregnancies were successfully completed, and so was the project. Jen gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Melissa. Kim had another son, Jack. Kim and Harv got married shortly before she gave birth. It was a small ceremony at Mountain Adventures. I spent 5 weeks preparing for the last fight of my boxing career. Jenks and Manny watched videos of both Sanchez's fights and our fight. They were trying to figure out what Sanchez could do differently. Jenks said, "You beat him in the late rounds, Brian. This fight is 15 rounds. He'll want to end it early." Manny added, "Not too early, though. When do you think, Jenks? The 9th or 10th. He'll try to start a war then, maybe the 8th. They were absolutely right. The battle began with a demonstration of technology. I peppered Sanchez with jabs. He hit me with good rights a couple of times. I noticed that when he threw his right hand, there was no pre-jab. It was a straight right punch, not like in the last fight. So he hit me. In my corner after the 7th round, Manny said, "He drops his left hand when he uses his right hand. You can catch him." The 8th round started calmly. I threw jabs and right crosses. Then Sanchez threw a right hand, and I knocked him down with a right hook. He fell on his butt. He immediately stood up. He had fire in his eyes. Oh. He rushed at me, and I pushed him onto the ropes, as I had done before. I hit him in the body, and he landed a nice uppercut to my chin. Then we moved to the center. He threw another right hand, and I caught him with a hook. I was surprised he didn't fall. The round is over. I asked Jenks in the corner, "What now?" "He'll go all in now. He's down on points after the knockdown. He'll get tired if you take the pressure." The forecast for the general onslaught was good. The prognosis for him to get tired is not good. Sanchez was a renewed fighter in the 9th. He struck from all sides. I got a few good ones, especially one to the head late in the round. I was exhausted when I returned to the corner. Jenks just told me to push him back. I knew what he meant. I won the last fight on the ropes with body shots. I just didn't know if I could do it. The next 5 rounds were a brawl, almost continuous with short breaks. I held on, pushing him against the ropes and delivering dozens of blows to his ribs and kidneys. He caught me twice with hooks that caught my attention and made me unsteady. I clinch after each one. I was sitting on a stool before the 15th round. I felt like I couldn't move. I looked at Jen. She raised her fist. "Your right fist," she said silently. "Get away from the ropes." I stood up and met him in the center of the ring. We hit the gloves. Then we went into full battle. After about 2 minutes, I was pushing him against the ropes and hitting him in the body again. He took several hits, and I felt him weaken. I stepped back and hit him with a right to the jaw. It was the hardest punch I've ever thrown, and he fell sideways onto the canvas. I staggered to my corner. I was sure the fight was over. But he got up. The referee talked to him, and he responded. We stood there for a second after the referee gave permission. They just watched. Then he waved to me. I threw a jab at his face, and he pushed me away. He landed a right punch to the head. The gong sounded as the blow missed my jaw. He collapsed on me, and I on him. I said, "You're a damn good fighter." "You too. I'll never fight you again." The decision was unanimous in my favor. I became a champion. There was no press conference after the fight. We both ended up in the hospital to recover. I left the next day. I looked like I had been hit by a truck. Back at the hotel, Jen and I just stayed in bed for a while. Then I went down to the press event. Jen came with me. I announced my retirement from boxing. I said that I achieved what I wanted and that I never want to fight Sanchez again. I said I'm sure he'll get the title back. He's the toughest guy in the world. When he stood up at the end, I was stunned. If he had hit me with the last blow, I might have been gone. That's enough for me. I didn't answer questions. The next day, we flew back to Mountain City. 5 years later. Jen and I have another child, Terrence. Melissa and Johnny are growing up healthy. They go to the local public school. Johnny has been training with Manny for some time now. Nobody messes with him. Kim and Harv also have another child, Joan. She's a sweetheart. So far, Kim hasn't found anyone to beat Harv. We all hold our collective breath. There are a lot of guys around who could do this, but I think motherhood has calmed her down. John and Eileen sold their home in Virginia and moved here. They have a small house near the Mountain Adventures complex. They still visit Manny. At night, mostly together, but sometimes just Eileen. Never just John. They all seem happy with this arrangement. I don't ask, they don't tell. The farm and mountain adventures are thriving. New employees come and go, but Rob and Billy are still here, teaching along with Manny, Jen, and sometimes me. There are no women in their lives. Amazing, right? Sanchez won the tournament for the vacant title. As for Jamal Bennett, he was never the same fighter again after the knockout. He retired from boxing last year and works in Washington public schools. He is married, and as I heard, he has children. He's not a bandit. He simply shouldn't have gotten involved with a married woman, especially with Kim. That's the problem. If he hadn't seduced Kim, I would never have become champion. I can't hate him anymore. Hate is bad for your health. And I still love chopping wood. I will never box again. Sometimes I watch MOF fights. This amuses me. End.